All right. Thank you so much for coming here today. So this is just as a refresher, the introduction to Notable and the Python data stack. I'm Dave, and there's Carol here. We'll go through introductions here in a second. So just brief agenda today. I'll give an introduction to myself and Carol here. We'll talk about what is Notable. I'll kind of walk through a live demo of Notable. Hopefully everyone here received an email from me last night with information about their accounts. If you haven't, just please let us know in the Discord channel. We're happy to add as many other people here that are interested in using this as in advance of the event next week. So just please let us know. So we'll give a demo of that, and then Carol will go through an introduction to the Python data stack. So quick introductions about us. So again, my name is Dave. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Notable. I've been here for nearly about 6 months, and prior to this, I spent all my career at the National Security Agency here in the US. I was there for about 17 years, but the last 6 of which I led our effort to use Jupyter Notebooks at scale. We built a very large community of over 13,000 users of notebooks, really representing a diverse use case of people from data science backgrounds and people that are brand new to data science or data analytics or even Python and coding. And so really saw how far notebooks can go to empower users to create their own solutions. And everything we're working on here at Notable just really advances that so much more, which we're really, really excited to show you here in a second. So I'll turn it over to Carol real quick for an introduction on her end.
Yeah, hi folks. My journey with notebooks went back to probably 2013. At the time I was doing volunteer work at a community makerspace in San Diego, where we had people from all over the community come in and build things. We used to say we like people to build their dreams. And one of the things I found with using the notebook was it broke down barriers for so many people to learn and share knowledge, and got really interested in that and have worked on the Jupyter project itself. And I have been very involved in the Python core development, but mostly I just love sharing knowledge, and I love seeing what people are doing with the tools. Right now I'm taking that background and helping the folks at Notable. We're kind of building on some of the initial research that we did and some of the initial tools that we built to hopefully make the experience even easier for folks, and as well as more powerful too. So it's sort of hopefully helping everyone be the best that they can with data. And with that, I just encourage you all, whatever level you are with data, wherever you are in your journey, ask questions. There is no, this is too simple a question to ask. If you don't know it, odds are somebody else doesn't know it. And I am happy to answer as many questions as I'm able, or find the answers later. So with that, back to Dave.
Perfect. And also all throughout this, please, if you have questions, ask them on the Discord channel. So if I'm talking, Carol will be monitoring it, or if Carol's talking, I'll be monitoring that. Please don't hesitate if there's something that we either skip over or talk too fast on that you have a question on, because again, we're here to help you get the most out of Notable, as well as get the most out of using Python in notebooks here. So please answer questions. We're more than happy to help where we can. But before we get too started, I want to quick say thank you to all the organizers and the volunteers and the mentors and the team leads for Datajam, in particular Laura and Han here that helped set up this workshop. We are so grateful to be here. This is an event that we at Notable have had circled on the calendar for months now, and we've been working hard towards and trying to get our platform ready. And we're super excited to kind of show it to you today. So thank you so much for both the opportunity to support you during this workshop, and everyone that's organized it, everyone that's here participating in it. We are absolutely thrilled to be here. All right, so what is Notable, right? Well, we're a very early stage startup. We're a little over a year old that is building a collaborative notebook solution that is really meant to empower users across all technical levels. And so you'll see as I get into the demo here, there's a lot we put into the tool that is really trying to kind of break down some of the barriers of entry to empower users to interact with data, especially interact with data visualization inside of a notebook framework at the lowest possible barrier to entry. And so there's a lot in there that we really think can really help users from all technical backgrounds succeed in doing analysis in a notebook type environment. Also, there's a big effort we put to kind of build Notable for the enterprise level in terms of security and access controls to ensure that you control how your notebooks are being shared and they're being collaborated inside your organization. But really, the most important thing that we get through today is hopefully to highlight how powerful it is for people of all various technical levels to succeed in working with notebooks. All right, so what does that look like? Again, I'm going to go a live demo here, but just kind of walk through a couple highlights. You can see on the left there, it is a notebook solution. So if you've seen Jupyter Notebooks for more, you may be familiar with a notebook format. Again, I'll give a demo of that, so we'll see a little more detail there. It's collaborative, so we can see in the middle there, we have a screenshot of the Vancouver Datajam space with over 130 unique users that are active in that space, and we can have the sharing and permission set up to allow users to collaborate in the subsets of teams or teams all within the platform. And then the low barrier of entry on the right there. So there's a visualization that I'm going to walk through a live demo of, show you how to create that all without any code, right? It's all just kind of native within the application. And you can just click through with this capability called Data Explorer to create really rich and powerful visualizations that will help you make sense out of your data. And so with that, we'll go right into demo time here. But I just want to remind everyone, everyone here should have received the email from me yesterday with information about how to log into their account. If you did not receive that, please let us know in Discord. If you had any troubles accessing your account, as far as following the instructions, you had to reset your password. So if any of that you had some challenges with, please just let us know. Again, we're going to work to make sure we get you up and running on the platform. All right, so this is what you might see when you first log into Noteable. I'll just talk through some of the high level kind of structure of how these notebooks are stored and shared and can be collaborated on inside the platform. At the highest level, we have this notion of space. So you can see here, we're in the Vancouver Datajam space. I can click on that little breadcrumb, we get a drop-down menu here. I can see some of my other spaces. One way to think about spaces is if you're familiar with Google Drives. So at the very top level, you can have this organizational structure here where I can create a space for Datajam. You can see I have 130 plus users in there. Or I could have my personal space, which is closed and private, for just me to collaborate on, or any other kind of way you want to, organize teams and efforts around data and notebooks. So within a space, we can have projects. So you can see here the list of projects. And the easy way to think about projects is that they're just folders, right? And so inside of a project, which is a folder, you can have notebooks, you can have data, you can have assets and images or anything else that you'd want to help do your analysis. So this allows you inside this kind of space setting to kind of logically group things together depending on what effort that you're working on. So you can see here, both Carol and I have created projects. So she has one here for the Notable Python data, and I've created one here where I've typoed it, Intro to the Notable Workshop. And inside of those, so we'll go and open Carol's one here in a new tab. And so inside of that, we will see any notebooks or any data files or anything else that Carol wanted to include in her exercise. And so here we go, right? So here's a full list of all the notebook files, which are these IPYNB files, if you're not familiar. We have a list of CSV files or data files that Carol is going to demo here in the second half of this workshop, all within this table. I'll just show you can go ahead and filter and sort and play around and kind of modify how you're viewing the table there. But we'll get started on my one. So I'll go into the Intro to Notable Workshop, and I'll talk about how to create a new notebook, how to add upload a notebook if you have an existing one, and how to add data sets here. So here we go. All right, so here's my project here. I've created a couple of notebooks before, but let's walk through the whole process of creating a notebook here for the first time. So I'm going to say create. I'm going to say create a notebook. And this is a demo notebook, right? When I hit create there, it is going to create that notebook for me and land me in that notebook view. So again, if potentially you haven't used Jupyter Notebooks before and haven't seen the notebook environment, I'll kind of just give a quick overview here. Notebooks are comprised of these cells. And inside the cell, you can have code cells where we support Python, SQL, and R, as well as markdown cells or prose or text cells. So for example, I can go into markdown here, and I can say, welcome to Notebook. Right? And if you're not familiar with the notebook environment before and are new to the markdown syntax, I'll just show you here. There's a little question mark there in the markdown. You can click on that and you get the full kind of description of all the variety of different markdown headers there. So we can see, for example, if you put stars around either side of something, it'll make it italicized. So I can go in here now to edit it. Of course, live demo and typing, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes here. But there we go. Welcome to Notable. And now that's italicized, right? We can do other things like this is bulleted list, right? And there we go for markdown cells. Within the cell menu here, I'll show you, you see a little plus at the top and a plus at the bottom. That allows you to add a new cell, either above or below it, depending on which one you click. So I'm going to add one below it here. I'm going to change this one over to Python, and let's kick off this notebook. All right, and so what's happening now, you see at the top, it says kernel starting. And so what that means is the actual computational resources that live in the cloud. This is a full SaaS, cloud hosted notebook environment. They are being spun up right now. So you knew that from a couple of different ways. That pop up at the top that said kernel connecting. Down at the bottom is always the status. You'll always see this. So what the status of the kernel is, you can say here it's connecting. On first startup of a notebook, when you first launch it, it could take up to 60 seconds just to connect that kernel. But then once that kernel is up and running, you will see the actual output of this cell. And so one of the simple things to do in Python is just to treat it like a calculator here. And so I just did 2 + 3. And so I'm going to wait for that to come back, which hopefully will be 5 if it does it correctly. So we'll see that here in a second. But I will show you here. So, I went through the adding a cell above and below. There's that little ... icon there that you can click on, which gives you all the other things that you can do to this cell, from that menu, as well as a cell menu at the top, which gives you many of those same capabilities of either interacting on that cell or potentially all cells. Like in this case, the run all cell. But there we go. Sure enough, it ran. It has the output of 5 here, and this is showing a little information about when this cell was last executed. I'm in Denver, Colorado, so this is all in Mountain Time Zone. So you're seeing it there. But one of the first questions you're going to ask, getting up and running a notebook, is how do I access my data? And so how do I play with my data? And so over on the left here, you can see within this project, again, that's this folder that was called misspelled Intro to Notable Workshop. Here are all the files that are currently within that folder. And if I want to add more files to it, I can go here, just kind of mouse over it, that little plus icon appears, and I can say add files. This little menu is going to pop up here, and if I get my Zoom thing out of the way, I can just drag and drop data over into it, or I could have clicked the upload from computer and just navigated to whatever directory and folder I wanted to upload that data. But I'm going to kind of build on some of the work that I think Laura did this morning in her workshop and use this exact same data set, which was the last couple of years of the mortgage delinquency rate over the various different provinces in Canada here. And so we'll get a shot to kind of look at some of that same data, potentially for users who were in that morning workshop here in the afternoon, and I'll particularly highlight some of the capabilities that we can do inside of DEX. Right, and so now we have that data up there on the left. How do we bring it into the notebook? Well, I'm going to go. I'll be using some capabilities that Carol will go into more detail this afternoon. Or sorry, this in the second half of this session of what different Python libraries are available. But one of the most common ones is this one, pandas. And so I'm going to read a CSV file in using pandas. And if you wanted to access it here, so all the files on the left, when you mouse over them, the ... menu appears as well, which will represent the menu of what you can do to that file. I'm just going to copy the path of that file, paste it here. And as you see, it's just a file name. So I could have typed that all in, but I probably would have made some mistakes. Typing that in live. And now we've read that file into a pandas data frame. And so we actually can see the snapshot of that data. And as I mentioned before, it shows kind of the province in Canada here, the year and the quarter, what the average delinquency rate was, the average mortgage amount, and what the population size was at that time. Right. And so what I want to kind of highlight here, and I'll show some examples of, is the various ways that Notable, in particular the visualization capabilities of Notable, helps us make better sense of that data. Right. So when I've read the CSV file in like this, and anytime you return a pandas data frame as the output of a cell, you will see a table like this. Which just gives you a summary of it. So you can see about the first 5 rows, the last 5 rows, some little summary of how many rows there are. An option if you want to see all of the rows in a big table here. But within the cell menu up in the right here, you can see we're currently viewing it as a table, and there's an option here that says click to visualize with DEX. And so this is where I think we get into some really powerful features of Notable. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So now we are seeing DEX, which is short for Data Explorer in Notable. And this is our much more feature-rich tabular view of the data, as well as the options for all the visualizations that you can do on top of it. So let me just walk through some examples here of just the table itself. So, the table, you can sort ascending, you can sort descending, you can change the label, the title of it. We can do filters now by just simply dragging the little slider there, that spark line. And so, if you want to zero in on a delinquency rate that is in between a certain amount, that's the filter up there. So as we're kind of playing around in the table, it's just showing us how the filter and the rest of the table is responding to that filter, but I'll go ahead and clear that out. But some of the really powerful features here are what you can do in the visualization front. And so one of the ways that I've always described DEX here is that it's not just a data explorer, it's a visualization explorer, because by clicking on the different types of charts here, we can explore the different styles of visualizing this data that we can offer. And again, we're doing all this obviously without any code, just by simply clicking around. So there's a big number, there's violin, there's all these different ones that we can go into here. But before I go too far, I did want to show, where you can go back to get questions, to answer your questions or find the documentation about Notable. So again, let me just move my Zoom window here. In the upper right, anywhere you are in the app, you'll see a little question mark there. You can click on the About Notable, or if you want to see release notes or feature requests or report a problem or any of the other options, they all generally will point you to the same place, which is this is our community forum. If you don't have an account on it, just by clicking this for the first time, it will automatically create an account for you. You don't have to have a separate username and password for it. It just uses your login to Notable, which hopefully you've previously gotten, but if you haven't, please just let us know. And inside of here, you can see it's a little knowledge-based section. One of the ones is Data Explorer. So, as I kind of just quickly talked about the different visualization types there, they're all available here to kind of go into more detail if you wanted to see more of the documentation about the different sizes, the different types of visualization. This also is a way you can come in and you want to submit a feature request, you want to file or issue a bug with us. We are an early stage startup, we're moving fast, but we have the potential to break things. So please let us know if you've run into any bugs and help us improve Notable for everyone. For the course of this this workshop, of course, and Datajam itself, right, we do have that Discord channel, so that's probably the best means for us, for you to kind of communicate with us. But you'll have your Notable account, even after Datajam is over. So as you continue using Notable after this, please, migrate over to the forum here and communicate with us that way. But for the purpose of the workshop, since you'll be in Discord already in the Datajam server, we have a Notable support channel set up, as well as obviously the one for this workshop that hopefully most people are in right now. All right, so I will go back. I'll close that out. But just want to show how you can get to that documentation and how you can get to some of those help resources when you have questions.
Hey, Dave,
right.
Can you show us from this interface one more time how they get there?
Yes, so it's always in the question at the upper right. That's the help menu. And that will be, I'll show you, it's also on the space page here. It will also be it's on every page, right? So right next to your name up at the top right, which I think for most of you will be your email address, but you can change that. So you can go into the settings here and you can change, how you want to be displayed inside the app. But I think by default, when you just created your accounts with the email address, it'll be your email address.
Thank you, Dave. I always find like knowing where help is always a really good thing when I'm new to a tool or a library. So thanks for going back over that. Perfect.
All right. So one of the things we want to do, obviously, is understand this data and make sense out of this data. So we saw already there was this table that again had, for each quarter of the past few years, for the area of Canada, a delinquency rate and an average mortgage amount population. So what type of visualizations can we do to help make sense out of this? One of the first things we may want to do, a very common visualization, is just a bar chart, right? So I can go into comparison charts, I can go into vertical bar chart, I just scroll down a little bit, and again, the zoom window always ends up getting in your way when you try to do these things. So let me make it the right side. There we go. We see all the different controls that we can do to the bar chart. And so one of the things we may want to do is go in here and look at the delinquency rate, average delinquency rate by geography, right? Which again is the kind of different provinces and areas of Canada here. And so we can see a simple bar chart, right, that shows us that data. And again, all this, right, without using any code. And one of the things we may want to look at here is add a rule to it. And this is conditional formatting, or a way to kind of color that bar chart based on the criteria of it. So we may want to say, anything that has less than, 0.4 delinquency rate, let's color that green, because we want to say that is good for a reason, or may not need attention. So what I want to highlight here is that if you look at British Columbia down here, the average delinquency rate over this data set is 0.28, which may look very good. But I want to kind of show how the different styles of visualization can potentially tell us a more rich story about that data. And so in particular, I'll go back to the summary charts here. And by default, I went to the violin plot. If you look down at the bottom of British Columbia here, it's really interesting. You see this kind of bimodal distribution where there are two clusters of data, one on the lower side here of a very low delinquency rate, but one on the higher side, which was actually above that 0.4 criteria that I showed before, right? And so you may kind of ask this question about, well, how can we understand this data better? Because on the bar chart and that kind of summary format, it looked like, BC was doing okay, but then now in this, we see that, it ranged from actually being well above 4 to being well below 4. So how can we understand this better? Let's go back to the table. And actually, sorry, the thing I should have shown you that's popping up right now is anytime you kind of navigate around to different visualizations, you see these options come up here to save that visualization. Either save it given the default name, which was table when we first went into it, or save it as a new one. So I'm just going to go back here and say violin plot for that. And let me go back to that bar chart, because you'll see why it's looking. And so obviously I don't want to save it as violin plot. I want to save it as a new name, which, and that's obviously not bar chart. Save as bar chart. And just to show you where that is going, if I click on that name here, we see the list of all my different saved views. So I can just immediately jump back and forth. Here's my violin plot. Here's my table. Here's my bar chart. Okay. Let's go back to that table, because we're trying to understand, right, well, how was there that range of data for British Columbia that initially on the in the bar chart looked like it was doing pretty low on average compared to the other provinces and areas, but on this chart kind of showed a different story. All right, so in the table view here, we can see we have a time column. Now this time column is giving us a year and a quarter, which by default is not being understood here in the table and by pandas as being a time field. And so if we actually go in the column here and say select data type, we can see that it's being treated as a string. But if we want to understand this data over time, we need to tell both the data frame and DEX here that this is a date time. So I'm going to click on that. This little thing pops up here, and it's going to ask us, well, what format was that? Right? Was it one of kind of these standard default formats, or was it a custom format? In this case here, again, we can see the original value. It's the 4-digit years plus the quarter after it. So it's not a standard kind of one of these standard default formats. It's going to be a custom one. And just the syntax for this, I'll just show you. You can click on that link here. It gives you to the documentation to find out what are all the different syntaxes for it. So YYY is the 4 years. And if you go down a little bit further, quarter, QQQ happens to be if you have the capital letter Q and then the 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter. So I can go in here and say YYYY, QQQ. And then that shows us in the preview section here, this is what the original value was. Now this is an actual date time that's kind of helping us make a date time analysis of this. So we went in there, and now what's nice about it is that it's being treated as a time. And again, it's the first time seeing it. I told you, it might have been hard to see, but a new option popped up at the top here. That's a time series chart that wasn't available initially because the data set didn't have a date time column as part of it. So now I can click on the time series chart. I can go ahead and plot a metric, and let's plot that delinquency rate metric. There we go. And we see a chart like this. And let's split the lines by geography, because we really want to we're interested in British Columbia. So there's British Columbia, it's the pink line. And what we can see is those clusters, right? It was high going back to 2012, I think this data set goes to, or certainly 2014 rate. And then it really dropped down to most recently being low. And so by kind of going through these different visualizations here, again, all of this just by simply clicking around and doing it in kind of a no-code format, we really understood, much more depth about potentially this data. So I'm going to create this one as a time series chart. Save. So now we have a couple of different ones that we really like to play around with, right? And I think I just got the bar chart wrong. So let me just, I don't know what's always doing a live demo. But there's a horizontal bar chart. There we go. Now, one of the other really neat features that we can do inside of Dex here is create a dashboard. And so what a dashboard allows us to do, and I'll make this a little bit wider, and sorry, just so I show you what I'm doing here. Cells by default will have kind of a more narrow width of your screen. One of the options on the right here, you can see the arrows pointing both directions, allow you to expand that if you prefer to see cells the full width of the screen, as well as the visualizations, now the full width of the screen. And of course, now the zoom thing's in my way, and move it out of the way. There we go. What I can do by clicking on that name, and again, seeing the options of all the different save views that I've had, is I can compose a dashboard. So in my dashboard, let's say I want that bar chart. Let's say I want that violin plot, and let's say I want the time series plot above it. Next, I'll say this is a demo dashboard, and hit next, and hit create. And now we have this dashboard, where this one cell, which was just a simple cell of reading the CSV file, but you can imagine if that cell was a more complex analysis that involved more code and was outputting a data frame, we can now see that in a variety of different ways down below. And anytime this cell gets updated and it runs again, potentially pulling in new data over time, or potentially changing the type of analysis we're doing in code there, all these visualizations down below will automatically update. And if we wanted to any one of these visualizations, we can go in here and simply change the chart mode, right? So instead of violin plot, we want a box plot. Now it's a box plot. Instead of this horizontal bar chart, we wanted something else. So I clicked the wrong one. I clicked the zoom to it. But again, there's all these, hopefully powerful options that you're seeing here for creating visualizations all through no code inside that notebook format that can help you better make sense of that data. And I'll show you here, if you were interested, there's a little option here so you can export this data itself. So if you wanted to export just this image, just this one visualization as an image, you can absolutely do that. If you wanted to export the whole notebook in a variety of different formats, you can do that as well as downloading the notebook over there. The last visualization style that I wanted to show, and then I'll pause after this because I haven't been watching Discord, and so I'll just pause if there happen to be any questions, but I'm gonna show you one more really powerful visualization, and that is the scatter plot. So again, I go into the comparison charts, scatter plot, and I can plot two different kind of columns or two different fields of data against each other. So let's plot the delinquency rate against the average mortgage amount. All right, so there we go. And we can kind of see that potentially there's some correlations between those two, but there are some other fields in this data set that we may want to also include in this visualization to help us better understand it. One of which may be the region, right? Because, is there a cluster here based on the geography? So let's add that as a color to the chart. And sure enough, right, looks like there is. And I can show you here, you can click on the legend down below and it'll update the chart above. So, turning on and off or toggling on and off different fields there. But there's another option we can do here of the circle size. So by default, all circle sizes are the same here, but let's make the circulation size the population size. And now I think we can, really understand this data to see some potential correlations of based on geography, based on average population size, based on average mortgage amount and the delinquency rate to kind of help us understand this data better. If we're interested in zooming in on this, we can do, it's a little bit bigger here, this brush option here, we can kind of drag over it, right, and kind of zoom on, zoom into any little area there to see that further. We see the option to filter to that brushed area. So just by dragging around this little box, we've created a filter based on these two fields, the mortgage amount delinquency rate. We can say filter to brushed area, and there we go. And up at the top, it's showing you what that filter currently is, as well as giving you the option to clear that filter if you ever wanted to clear the filter.
So Dave,
yes.
We've gotten a couple questions about exporting,
Yes.
both as PDF and HTML. And maybe you could run through an example of each, just so folks can see what it looks like and what abilities, like whether it's interactive or not interactive.
Excellent point. Yes. So yeah, I'll run through both of those. I will say the feature, so I mentioned we're an early stage startup. I guess one of the things I didn't mention that's really exciting about Datajam is you are some of the very first users to get access to this. And so you are really, we're part of our kind of, private beta here. You are absolutely among the very first users to see this. And so we're really excited about that. We're really interested in your feedback and really interested in any feature requests or, again, challenges or issues that you run into to help make this better. But one of the things that you'll see, and then we'll talk about it here with the export, is that this was a feature that was added in just recently in the last couple of weeks. We are constantly improving this. We're constantly trying to improve the experience. And so as you start playing around with some of these things, if you do something and you wish it either did something else or you wish it had some more features there, please just let us know, because we're always trying to improve this and make this better. So let's export this notebook as a PDF, for example. And so we're going to click on that. And it's running, just kind of a caution right now, it's running. We do have a feature request to try to give you an indicator or a spinner or something that's happening, but it ran, and if you saw on my screen, a little thing popped up down here below that says demo notebook. Let's look at it there. And so now this is just a PDF rendering of that notebook. It is not interactive anymore. It is essentially as if I just did a screenshot of that notebook, but you see the visualization. You see those code cells, you see the markdown cells. Just for feature requests on our side, right? You can see that the legend down at the bottom is not being rendered potentially as nicely as it should be. So we can certainly add that to go back and look at, because it should have, potentially had them all in the view, but you get a view of it there. I could go ahead and I could do that same export as HTML. And again, it's running. It may just take a second or two. And then there's that file that it created. And here's that same view. Now this is an HTML file instead of a PDF file. So now, again, this is just like a screenshot of it. It's not interactive. I can't edit any of these things. I can't play around in decks. This is potentially a way for you to generate a report or an output of your analysis if you wanted to kind of share that outside of the interactive notebook environment. To, again, produce a PDF is a very common way that people export their notebooks. They can do it there. I'll also show you here, I can download the notebook itself. So I can download the notebook file. So if you had Jupyter running locally, or if you had, access to it, another kind of notebook type environment, here's the full IPYNB file that you can go ahead and upload into that environment.
Yeah.
Does that help, Carol?
Yeah, no, that was absolutely fantastic. I think that helped. If folks still have questions, let us know. Just a point about the HTML file. It is at that point like a normal HTML file. So if you were proficient in CSS or new HTML, you could certainly go in and edit that file and customize it even further. So something just to keep in mind. But I think most folks will probably use the PDF, but the HTML is there for folks to use as a baseline or to take and move into something else as well.
Perfect. All right. So now, again, just kind of walk through that very, very high level, how DEX and Data Explorer helps you create some really rich visualizations inside the notebook. I want to take a quick step back now and kind of just talk around the kind of collaboration aspects of Notable, and how over the next week and just going in the future, you can work with other users as part of teams or groups inside Notable. So I'll just show you at the right here, oh, sorry, on the left. We can see this is that name of that project, which is the folder that I had. If you click this little button here, it'll pop it out into a new tab. And then let me close out some of these other tabs so I don't get too confused with myself. All right, so here is my project, right? And just again, the kind of nested hierarchy inside Notable. We have the space, which is Vancouver Datajam, which we all should have access to. Again, if you don't have access to it, please let us know, and we can go ahead and fix that. And then these are the projects or folders that I have access to. And so now, how do I make this accessible to anyone else? Because if you happen to be playing around right now and watching this, you should not currently be able to see the Intro to Notable workshop project. And I can get an indication of that by that little kind of closed padlock icon there. But I can click the project access here to say, all right, how do I want to expose the visibility of this to other users? I can add in individual users, one at a time. So I can add Carol here as a viewer if I want, or I can make the whole project accessible to everyone inside this space by making it open. What I'll show you right now is the first option that we have here is the viewer option. Viewer just simply means that they can view the notebook in a read-only state, so they're not able to execute it, they're not able to edit it and overwrite it. They have a button at the top, and I will show you, because I'll go to Carol's one here in a second, that they can kind of fork or copy and edit that to their own personal space. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be adding in support for contributor and owner and executor and some other roles that enable that kind of real-time collaboration, so that Carol and I could be actually editing the same notebook in the same way that we could co-edit a Google Doc without kind of collaborating each other. So that's not currently there, but that will be coming very shortly over the next few weeks. So the option you have for now is to make someone else a viewer. And so now Carol is a viewer, as well as that icon there indicates that the entire space was given open access to see that. So if I were to back up here in a second, now if you're in the Vancouver Datajam space, you should see Carol's project that she made accessible to everyone. So there's Carol's. Here's my project. Here's Laura's project from earlier this morning. And then now I have a private one, or Data Explorer examples that I don't have in there. So that's one option for collaboration, one way that you can expose notebooks. I will, because I did mention it earlier, I will show what happens when you view someone else's notebook. So I'll go and view one of Carol's notebooks here in a second. And just as a fair warning, you're seeing it here, you'll see it on your own use of it. Right now, it is a little slow as you're clicking around, kind of navigating between projects and folders. We absolutely are aware of that. We're going to work on it hard this following week to help improve that. So just please be patient with us at the start, but I'll go ahead and open the notebook here. And so now I see I'm only a viewer of this notebook, but I have the option to copy and edit it. I can't, all those little cell options that were there before, the little play button, adding a new cell, toggling from table to DAX, or anything else aren't available to me because I'm only in a view only mode. If I were to copy and edit this, it's going to ask me, well, what project that I own, what folder again do I own that I want to put this in? I can put it in here and hit duplicate, because what I'm doing is just making a copy of this. And now here's that exact same notebook, but now as you can see, I can actually run these cells. I can change things around. Okay. The other option that we have to share notebooks is this idea called playground mode. And so playground mode gives everyone a copy of the notebook that they can run in their own kind of sandbox. So I'll show you. If I share this in playground mode, and again, I can walk through it quickly, but if you have a notebook in the file menu, you click share in playground mode, we hit enable to enable that. I'll hit done here. And so now, if I were to go back to that space, so let me go back here to that space, what we should see as a couple things. So you saw there was an ability to copy the link, so I can now copy that link and send it to anyone. The other way people can discover playground mode notebooks, if I go back into Vancouver Datajam space, is there's a project or a folder that collects all the playground mode notebooks within that space. So my notebook now, demo notebook, should be within there. If I click on that and go into it, there we go. There's demo notebook. Now, when I click on this, I just want to kind of highlight what the difference is. This now says it's in playground mode. I have the full ability to execute this, but I'm in my own sandbox. So I am not overwriting my as the author, the original version of that notebook. I have a copy of it that is in the safe playground that I can play with myself. I can change, I can edit it. I can change the different values of it, but I'm not going to overwrite that existing user. So for example, if you had a notebook that you wanted to make accessible to others to play around with, playground mode is one option for you to do. The other options was what we saw here with Carol's notebook, where anybody can view these notebooks. They now have the copy and edit button where they can then save off a copy of that notebook into their own project or their own folder that they have access to. So I'll pause there real quickly too. Carol, are there any questions on the kind of sharing options?
We have several questions, so
Perfect.
let's just go through them slowly.
Yep.
So the first question we got was, let me read it in the scroll back here. How, when exporting to an IPYNB, does it include the visualizations?
Great question. It will include visualizations. So if you sat in Laura's presentation earlier this morning, I think she was highlighting Plotly style, the code-based visualizations. Those will be included. If you export, and Carol, you correct me if I'm wrong here, right? With Dex and Data Explorer, those visualizations will be unique to Notable. Is that accurate?
That's correct at this point in time. So probably the rule of thumb is Data Explorer works great within Notable itself when you're sharing notebooks with each other. But when you're using things like Plotly or Matplotlib or other visualization libraries, those will be accessible when you share outside of Notable. And the reason being is that Jupyter itself doesn't have Data Explorer built into it. So you can still use the notebooks that have Data Explorer in, you just will not at this point in time have the visualizations that Data Explorer created.
Yeah, so if I ran this exact same notebook in Jupyter, I would see the table view because it'd be outputting this table as a pandas data frame. So I would see this view. What you would not have is all the different visualizations that you can do on top of that table that are unique to Notable currently. Cool. What other questions were there?
Let's see. The next one is, how do you version control between all the notebooks?
Great question. So versioning is actually next up on our roadmap list. So it is not in Notable currently, but we have it on our list to tackle next, because that is one of the most common use cases that we hear. Obviously, one of the most common requirements that people have with notebooks. So there isn't anything currently inside of Notable, but very shortly we will be working to add that in. Carol, I don't know if you want to talk about outside of Notable with GitHub and other options.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of goes back to earlier days with classic Jupyter Notebook, and when there was no Git integration with like some of the plugins that Jupyter Lab has now. And so basically, that downloading the IPYNBs and, version controlling it through Git and GitHub totally works. As does, certain folks like to save their notebooks in Drive, Dropbox, whatever. That's also works. If you're a scientist, I would discourage that and use version control. But the other thing we're doing behind the scenes, each time you're saving, we're actually saving a version of the notebook. So should there be a big catastrophe or something down the line, you'll be able to recover different versions, but we just don't have it built into the system as of yet. And as Dave said, you are we have great respect for Datajam and Laura. And, back in May, I guess, when we decided that we were going to offer this, it was something that we wanted to share with the education community. And so you're getting a really, really early look at this. And it's something we're really proud of, those of us that have worked on Jupyter and Interact and in the ecosystem for a while. We feel like we're pulling together some of the best things for people to both explore data, but also learn with data.
Awesome. More questions still?
A question about playground mode. So we're basically gaining edit rights on a snapshot of the code at the time of the import into the playground. And I said yes, but if you want to expand, feel free.
Yep. So for example, so I shared this notebook here, and let's put another, just right. Hello. Of course, this is I don't try to type too much during live demos because I always make a lot of mistakes. So there we go. We'll save this notebook here. So if you go back to the playground mode here, right, we saw the snapshot of that notebook at the moment that I pressed share in playground mode. So you can see it has 2+3, the DEX rendering that CSV file, but that's it. Now as the author, I've added a new cell here. It says print hello. So if I want to publish that, I go back to share in playground mode. There should have been a live demo here. There should have been an update button. I don't know why there is not. So we'll go back. I saved it here. Share in playground mode. There it is. Sorry, maybe I didn't save it in time. So there's an update button. I guess obviously you have to save the notebook before you can publish that change. So I must not have saved it. Hit update. Now playground mode has been updated. And now again, live demo. If I refresh the playground mode, I see the new cell. There we go. So yes, when you hit share in playground, you're sharing a snapshot of it. You as the author can edit it as much as you want and then publish those changes at the time that you want to publish the changes for your other users to see.
That's super cool. I didn't even know that was in there already. So that is neat. Thanks, Dave.
Cool. Other questions still, or is?
No, Warren was just commenting about how cool it was or how neat it was that you could update it.
Perfect.
Which I agree. It is pretty cool.
Perfect. All right. So there's two more kind of big features that I want to just really highlight. And then we can take more questions too, and then we'll turn it over to Carol for the side of it. But I want to talk about these files here on the left when you upload files. Right. So you saw me going before and hit, add files, and I drag and drop thing in. I could have clicked upload from my computer. But what happens if I try to upload a really large file? So here's a 160, 154 meg file. You can see here it generates an error. It's saying convert it to a data set. So the concept of data sets is a really cool capability that we've added that I want to highlight here. So any of these project files, they open the left, and it actually told us here, limit of 25 megs per file. These are automatically loaded into that active session anytime you run a kernel, anytime you add a file, everything is immediately and automatically added in. But when you have larger files, and data sets for us can go up to 50 gigs, so you have these really, really large files, you may not want to automatically load them up into every single notebook you have running inside this folder, inside this project. And so data sets is this notion of remote storage for large files that you can selectively add those data files in to a notebook session when you need them and when you want them, so that they're not all automatically in the size of them being loaded in. So how do we do this? Well, we create a data set, right? So say demo data set, create. Did I miss the button? Sorry. Demo data set 2, hit create. And it should be there. Oh, I don't, sorry, it's a live demo. I don't know why it's not showing up, but it should have shown up there at the left. And then when I add a file to it, Same way, exact same modal will come up in the data set and will allow me to add the file that way. Let me go over to a different project where I have one set up. I'm sorry that that didn't work on the first. That should have worked, but this is where live demos can sometimes get you. So here's the data set over here, right? I can say add files to that data set, right? I can bring these large files in. I'm going to add a small file in just for the sake of the upload time, because I don't want to have you watch me upload a massive file. And then you see the file within that data set. And like I mentioned, these are in remote storage. They're not automatically made available inside the notebook. And so how you bring them in is you can click over this little thing here, and there's a read into the environment. I can click on that. And so now there is a little magic command that when I run that cell, it is going to pull this data set, which again could have been up to 50 gigs, into this session and make that available. So this is one way if you're interested in working with very large data files within your notebook, this would be the way to do it. The other thing that I wanted to show quickly was a SQL cell. So I mentioned before, we support Python, we support R. You can toggle back between them at the bottom here. So you can see that's Python 3. I can change it to R. If I were to do so, it would restart this whole session, and these drop downs would be Python instead of R. But I'll focus on the Python side of it for now, so I won't click that and disrupt this current session. But you could do that. But what I could do is if I wanted to take this CSV file and start playing around with that in SQL, right? How do I do that? So I can click here, I can say create SQL view. It's going to add a cell in there. And this cell again is one of these magic commands inside of Noteable, where it's going to take this CSV file, going to put it into a table named that, which I could have changed the name of it. So I can change this to demo table. And now it's going to tell us that, hey, next create a SQL cell and then input a query. So let me change this Python cell to SQL. Let's connect it to the local database. Those are the two steps that you have to do. And there is, I'll actually show you, there's one more place for documentation that I wanted to show that highlights all of this. I could say select count star from demo table. And there we go. Right. So now I can do SQL, get results out of it. One of the things you can do is not only do your SQL, but then again, all the visualization that you want to do on top of the results, because DEX is now fully accessible for the results of a SQL cell the way it was before the results of the Python cell. So for people who are more familiar working in SQL, you could upload a CSV file, just copy this, just click this one button to create SQL view, run that cell. It will be a Python cell, but just hit run. And then you can do your rest of your work in SQL and still have access to all the same visualizations that you had access to before. But so I went over both of those, the data sets and the SQL stuff quickly. I want to show you where that documentation is on those. So one of the spaces that we have available to all users is called Noteable Core. And the Noteable Core space is not just documentation, but it's actually notebooks that you can fully interact with to help you better understand Noteable. So you can see here, before I was in the Vancouver Datajam space, again, think of them like Google Drives. Now I'm in the Noteable Core space. Here's a Noteable and Notebook introduction folder or project, and here's a data visualization with DEX folder or project. I will go into the Noteable and Notebook introduction, and here is your how to work with SQL cells inside of a notebook. And here is your working with data set files inside of a notebook. So again, I went over them very quickly here, but this is being recorded. You can go back and watch it, or you can go and view this notebook here. And this notebook would walk you through that.
Quick question, Dave.
Yep.
Can you take the output of a SQL query and save it into a local variable?
Currently, no. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, but I think currently no, but that is on our roadmap, I believe, for some of the enhancements we want to add later this year. Correct?
Pierre would know the answer better than me. I don't do as much SQL stuff.
So you can do it because if you want to go back to your demo notebook,
okay.
The output of a SQL cell is a data frame. So you can easily name the data frame. There is many ways to do that. A very, very simple way that some people do is if you go back to your notebook.
Yeah. Let me get back here in a second. Yeah, and so this is Pierre. Again, I mentioned introduction before. Pierre is our Chief Product Officer, one of the co-founders here at Noteable. So he was kind enough to dial in and hear this presentation.
For example, any way you want to rename a data frame or the output of a cell, there is a very easy way in Python that I use that is not the best practices. But for example, you can do variable equal underscore, and that will take the latest output. And latest output being your data frame, and so you'll be able to name that output of that SQL and then manipulate it in Python. So there is that way, for example, to go back and forth between SQL and Python.
So just to recap, in notebooks in Jupyter, the underscore, or in IPython, the underscore takes the last value, and since the last value after you do the SQL query is a data frame, by saying like my data frame equals underscore, you'll get a now named variable with that data frame in it. So, and by the way, Pierre is like our expert data scientist at Noteable as well. So he's probably done more data science than I've ever looked at in my life. So, you know, he's a great resource for information like this.
But it's like that, right?
So do df, for example, or whatever you want, equal underscore. Just underscore.
Just underscore. There you go.
And now you do df just to render that variable you just named, and that will be that table.
There you go.
So now you can play with in Python with the output of your SQL.
Oh, Python shape, right? There we go. There it is.
This would be a good thing for us to add to the documentation if it's not already there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. We'll pause here again. Were there any other questions?
I don't think so, but I think folks can unmute too if they have questions.
Yeah.
Or am I wrong on that? I think you can. So if somebody has a live question, please do so.
One last thing I will show you that I haven't shown yet. So on the upper left here in the menu, this is your project files again, your data sets down below. There's an option there at the far right. If you click on that, it goes to hardware settings. This is what allows you to pick a different hardware size depending on the size of your data and the scale of the computation that you need to do. So by default, we're all put into these small sessions that have 1 CPU and 4 gigs memory, but you can go up, as high as you need. At any point, if you actually run out of memory, so if I ran out of memory in this notebook, it would just pop up a little window to say, would you like a larger session? And so you could increase the hardware size that way. To show that. Any last questions here before we turn it over to Carol for her half of it? Okay, we can do that. Again, I'll be active when Carol's talking. I'll be in the Discord channel monitoring it for the rest of this workshop as well as the whole next week. So please don't hesitate to reach out if there are any questions or kind of follow-up questions. And if you want to just DM me as well, feel comfortable asking in the full forum, please go ahead and do that. We're more than happy to help. And just please, again, if you didn't get the email and aren't able to access Noteable currently, please just reach out to me and I'm more than happy to help there too. So.
Yeah, so what I'm going to say, because this is sort of a longer workshop, that maybe we take a quick bio break, come back at the 15 after the hour, and then, in the interim, folks are welcome to unmute themselves, chat with each other, chat with Dave, chat with myself. It'll also give me a chance to get my screens all set up for doing the demo now. So thanks. Okay, we're going to get started in just a few seconds. I want to make sure everybody can see the screen share.
Yep, I see it at my end.
Super, fantastic. All right, I think we're pretty close on time. And so we're going to switch gears a little bit. Dave gave us an amazing whirlwind tour of some of the things, and not even all of the things that we're working on at Noteable. So for that, I thank him, and hopefully you'll continue after today to continue using the platform. It's really something that has grown out of just our love of data and helping people learn to use data. What I'm going to do is switch gears a little bit and talk more about how we use data and the thought process that we go beyond that to do that, and introduce you to some of the Python data stack, as well as how to think about data. And then after this short presentation, we'll open up some of the notebooks and let you kind of play around with them. They're sort of self-guided, and you know, give you a chance to have some hands-on while you've got folks here that can help answer questions as well. So without further ado, apparently so when we do data analysis with Python or with R, we face 4 key challenges. The first challenge is the scale of data. What we've seen over the last 10 years is the amount of data we collect as an organization or a community group is growing in huge amounts. And oftentimes the scale of our data can feel like dropping a pin out of the airplane window, if you could safely, into the mountains, and then trying to go back and find that data element again, just vast amounts of data. The other challenge that we face is the speed or rate at which data is generated. Is particularly with streaming data, the data that we're getting in is coming in faster than ever before. And the other aspect of speed is analyzing that data. The pressure to do an analysis is becoming even quicker still. Another big challenge is you've got lots of connections from many different people to your data sources, as well as connections between data sources that you're having to manage. And by that, you know, one of the nice things about Noteable is you're able to consolidate all your data in an interface where you can access it no matter where it's located. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And then the last thing is the number of choices that you have. And by this, it's the number of choices you have for libraries, for specialized libraries that maybe serve a particular industry. Those are great. And we want to offer people the ability to have choices like that. But for folks that are just getting started, it can be really overwhelming. So we also want to kind of offer you some best practices and a good foundation to move forward from as well. So what do? Well, what we do is think about the process and how we break down how to analyze data. And really, the key is to start small and then scale to larger notebooks, larger data sets. And that's how you're going to set yourself up for success. If you're using a new language or a new library, start small first and then progressively go larger. And that makes reasonable sense. And if anybody can surf this wave, I'm really impressed. So in general, our data workflow has several different steps within it. Oftentimes we'll, organize the project at the beginning. There'll be collection of data, and then oftentimes a lot of cleaning and organizing of data. Some initial exploratory analysis, which can be done both within code, but also with things like Data Explorer. The ability to click through things quickly actually is really useful when you're trying to find things within data. And one thing we didn't show in Data Explorer is the way to annotate points. And so that you can come back and look at a particular point in your data. And then you're going to oftentimes do some computation and modeling, particularly folks that are interested in machine learning, deep learning. And then a big part of our data is sharing the results or deploying those dashboards or even algorithms at scale. And once you've deployed something at scale, you need to continue to monitor it, make sure it's serving your users. And then, time to time, particularly if you've got machine learning, AI models, things like that, you want to go back and revisit your goals and that you had at the project definition to make sure that your models haven't drifted from its original intent. And sometimes those steps get overlooked as people look at how to work with data. So what are some tools that we use for data analysis? In many cases, we're using a number of different programming languages. Python and R by far are the most popular data science libraries, but Julia, Fortran, SQL is used by Python, R, and Julia. But then when you start looking at workflows of data at scale, you're also introducing a number of other languages. And then when you're actually looking at interactivity of data, and particularly within visualizations, you're adding in other languages as well. So while we often talk about Python, Jupyter Notebooks itself was made up of a combination of Python and JavaScript. So all of these languages working together gives us a richer experience than just one alone. So looking at the workflow, this slide, and it's more for reference later, is kind of explaining what typically happens at each of these stages within our data workflow. And in the next couple slides, I will give some of my favorite tools or commonly used tools for each of these in both a Python environment and an R environment. So if we look at Python, sometimes we're going to be using Python scripts. There are very common libraries like Pandas that is used for managing data frames and manipulation of data frames. For those of you that have had experience with Pandas, there's a great library called PyJanitor that helps you more programmatically clean up your data frames and data sources and can be a real time saver. And then Dask is something that lets you use larger data frames and as well as doing some scheduling. Exploratory data analysis, those are some of the common libraries that have been used. SciPy is part of like the traditional data stack along with Pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn, and Matplotlib. Let me see what else. For visualization, if you look at the right-hand side where we say charts, reports, dashboards, web apps, Matplotlib, Seaborn, Altair, and Plotly have traditionally been the modern popular data visualization libraries. And what they've achieved with Data Explorer would oftentimes require much more code in order to generate those with the same library for the Python libraries, which he used Dex, which was pretty much a couple clicks and you had what you wanted and could change it really quickly. And one of the things that's important about that is as people are learning, the visualizations are more and more difficult as a learner than just pointing and clicking and seeing the response. R, very similar. I'm not going to go too much into this, but know that you can use R and the number of different libraries they have a rich ecosystem as well. So the Python data stack itself as I said before, Pandas, SciPy, NumPy, scikit-learn for machine learning, and Matplotlib were the traditional Python data stack that have been around for the last 10 years. And Jupyter Notebooks certainly helped make all of those libraries much more popular because it just became easier to use. And as I said before, we have sort of the basic traditional, but then also some modern libraries coming in, and we're seeing more and more each day. And so oftentimes it's like, okay, what do you choose? Well, oftentimes the bulk of the beginning work that you're going to be doing when you're looking at data is using Pandas. And one of the nice things is Pandas recently revamped all its documentation. So if you're an R user and tried Pandas in the past and thought it was a little cryptic, the documentation is much better now that it is more task-oriented and much more analogous to the R library data documentation. So what I want to do is get you folks using the notebooks themselves. And to do that, let's jump away from Keynote. And let me see. Can you folks see that? Too small, too big? Does it need to be bigger? And I'll leave Dave as you to be the decider of that.
Yeah, I can see your screen. The text looks a little small. I don't know if you had zoomed out at all, or is that?
Yeah, let's see. Better?
Much better, yes.
Okay. All right. So there's this number of, I can't see my whole browser at the same time. So within, oh, this is going to be annoying. Can I make it a little smaller? I'm going to do this a little differently so I can see my browser. Let me know if I now made it too small for everybody. Still okay?
Yeah, I think it's still good. Yeah.
Okay. So in the Notable Python data project, we have a series of notebooks. One is just an outline of sort of what Dave and I were sort of thinking about covering today. The Python data stack notebook is one that really just introduces the basics of the data stack. And since I anticipated that we would have people from all different levels of understanding and usability of the different libraries, I've kind of kept this somewhat high level and then letting you do your choose your own adventure story beyond this. So this we talked about in the slide deck. I want folks to be aware of mybinder.org. It is a free open source tool that I and others worked on that let you launch Jupyter Notebooks in the cloud. So if you have friends that don't yet have access to Notable, this is a good alternative until they are able to have access to Notable. So let's take a closer look. Oftentimes, if you're wanting to use a library in Python, the first thing you need to do is import that library. And actually, there's a small step before that, which is installing the libraries, but Notable has many of the common libraries already installed with you, so that hard step of installation has been taken care of already. So if we run this cell, and once the kernel gets started, it will import IPython, NumPy, SciPy, Pandas, and Matplotlib. And here you'll see that import NumPy as NP, import Pandas as PD, import Matplotlib as PLT. Really, all that's doing is changing the NumPy name to a shorthand of NP so that you can refer to it a little bit easier in future statements. Let's see. While this imports, oftentimes what's really useful is when you're creating a notebook to save the version of the libraries that you're actually using. And I oftentimes will run some cell like this either at the beginning or the end of my notebook. And if you're new to Python, this F is called an F string. And what that lets you do is combine both text to be outputted as well as in between the braces is an actual command to get a version of the library itself. So if we run this, what these 4 commands are doing is they're going to the IPython library, the NumPy library, SciPy library, and Matplotlib library and saying, hey, let's get the version of this library. And if we wanted to do the same thing for pandas, what we would do, and you are welcome to do it in your notebook if you have it up, is just say pandas. This would be text, a space, and then a brace with, and remember, if we use pandas, we're going to use the shorthand of PD instead of the whole word. You'll probably get an error if you use the whole word in this particular case. So we do PD and double underscore, or you might in Python hear it called dunder as a shorthand for double underscore. And if we execute this now by hitting either Shift Enter or by hitting the play button, should execute that cell and say that right now we're using pandas 1.3.3. And so we've got our libraries imported. Sometimes as we're working with a library, we're not quite sure how to get help. And within the notebooks, you can actually execute the command help with the library name, run it, and you'll get in line here within the notebook, actually documentation on the functions, the parameters, which can be really handy. So if we wanted to do a similar thing for NumPy, we would use the help command with NP, which is our variable name that we're using to represent the NumPy library. Hit Shift Enter. And if the demo goddesses are working well for us, we'll see the NumPy documentation come up as well. Might take an extra second as it goes out on the internet to take a look at this. So just know that help is there within the notebook as well as at the on the documentation sites as well. So just to recap from this very short notebook, Pandas, SciPy, NumPy, Matplotlib, and SciPy and IPython are going to be your common basic tools that you'll use, and you start by importing them. It's good practice to understand what version you're using, particularly if you're doing any work that requires reproducibility, and other people are going to try and recreate your results at a later date. Knowing the version is really helpful. And then just remember there is the help command within Python as well. The next notebook is the one number 8, which is the example. I think Dave briefly displayed it, which kind of takes you through a standard workflow of acquiring data, doing some basic descriptions and statistics of that data, and then letting you then do some visualizations. So what I'm going to do is encourage folks to actually run through this on their own. I will talk through it, but if you're going faster than me, that's awesome. This other notebook, which says template explore data, is a very similar notebook that what you can do is in this particular cell here, enter either a public URL to a CSV or choose one of the CSV files that we have over here and actually do some analysis of that data. And this is something that, you can continue to use this notebook over time with data sets and might give you a good foundation for as you're working with data. So to go back to the, yes, I had this notebook open for a long time. This notebook is going to give you 3 major tasks: to acquire your data, describe your data, and then explore your data. And Pandas is the tool that we're using to do that. So first thing we're going to do is we have a variable called source, and we're going to set that to the Oscars data CSV. Hit Shift Enter, and as soon as the kernel comes back to me, now everything in this CSV will be kept within this source variable. And I don't know, Dave, did you show that you can actually view the CSV data?
No, I didn't. Yeah, that's a great thing to show.
Sorry if my system's a little slow, but you can actually see the CSV here, which can be handy if you're just trying to get a sense of, okay, what's in this? What is this again? What are some of the, titles of columns from the original data set? So hopefully now, if we go back to Oscars, we now have a thing. And remember, Dave said, once you've executed it, you'll see that nice number next to it saying that it has been executed. I intersperse my Python cells with Markdown cells and use Markdown to explain the process of what I'm doing when I'm doing data analysis. If I wanted to change this, you would just click into the cell, say this research uses Pandas, and then Shift Enter, and it would re-render it for you. So remember, when we start a new notebook, what we want to do is import the library that we're going to be using. So in this case, we're going to import Pandas in its shorthand PD. And a data frame is really, when we talk about data frames, it's basically a row and column grid of information, much like you'd have in Excel, Google Sheets. So if I hit Shift Enter here, it's going to take that CSV, read it in from that source file that we looked at before. And because my kernel restarted, I now need to go back and rerun these cells. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. So now I have a data frame with the variable df. In Pandas, you can read in lots of different types of data sources. If you have an Excel file, there's a command for that. If you have a JSON file, there's a command for that. And typically it's read underscore and then whatever the file type is. So let's look at, Dave had done before, look at the head, which is the first 5 rows of the data in the data set. And you can look here, look at columns, things like that. In addition, there's another command called tail, which will let you look at the last 5 rows of your data set, which if your data is in order or things like that, you may be able to see, the size of things changing, but it's oftentimes just to get a sense of the data set itself. And if you put a number in there, it will display a different number of rows for you. Oftentimes when we're working with the data set, we want to know what are the number of rows and columns in that data frame. And using the shape attribute, we get 184 and 11. But that's not really user-friendly in terms of reading it. So if we're sharing this with somebody else, what you might want to use is the print statement using an F string that says, okay, let's take the data frame shape, first position, Python numbers an array with 0 as the start. So this would be the 0 position, the 1 position would be the second one. And what you can then do is actually output that you will have 184 rows and 11 columns. Oftentimes, when you're first using a data set, you want to know what the column names are and what the data types are. Did Laura have a question?
Yes, so there's a question in the chat for Dave.
Sure.
And the question is, where can we find the data?
Yeah, so Carol, right now you have those data files in your project, and I was going to go look to see because I think other users should be able to click and download them, because when they copy and edit the notebook, they don't get the data files with them. And so I was just checking right now to see.
Oh, you know where they all are, Dave? In the Google Drive.
Okay.
If not, what I can do is, do you want me to drop it in the chat?
Where I can actually show, well, you can show it here. So if anybody is viewing this notebook that Carol has here, so they see the copy and edit button up at the top, right, to copy that notebook. But if you go on the left there, right where Carol was just over, where all the CSV files are, everyone has the ability to click the little 3 dots menu and download the CSV. And then they can follow the same process that I did before of uploading the CSV. But yeah, but right now what's happening is these files are inside of the project that Carol has. So when you copy the notebook into a new project, that folder doesn't have these CSV files in it by default. And so you just need to either download or upload, or if the data is on the web somewhere, you can pull it in that way.
Do you have these files yet, Dave? Because if you don't, it might be easier to show folks.
Yep. So let me
stop sharing and let you share.
Well, let me go through the full. Yeah. So, sorry, hang on a second here. All right. So we see here, right? I'm in this fair. So let me download Oscars.csv. Sorry, wrong one. There you go. Download. So now I've downloaded. There's Oscars.csv downloaded. I'm going to copy and edit this notebook here. Again, it's going to ask a project of mine. Then I'll put this in. I think one of the other kind of things that I think a user might have run into is if you haven't created a project yet within the Vancouver Datajam space, you won't have any options in the dropdown here. And so you would have had to previously create a project, but I can see here are my projects, 2 projects that I have. I can now duplicate the notebook, and I've already done it once before, so try to. I'll do it again. And again, now I have a copy of the notebook in my own space. I can add this file in. I'll put my computer. Let's go to downloads. There's Oscar.csv. There we go. All right. So now I have it. The one step, right, that that you would have to have done first, that I'll go back and show you here, is if you haven't created a project or a folder inside of the Datajam space for yourself, then when you try to copy Carol's notebook, you'll see that you don't have any things on that drop-down list to do. So probably the first step for everyone here to do is within the Datajam space, which I'm toggling over to here in a second, say create project, and I call this Dave's project. Great. And there we go.
Do you want to run through like downloading another CSV just so folks see
Totally.
the process again?
Yep. So yeah. So now I have a project. It's empty. No surprise. I'm going to go back we'll go back to the space level here. And we'll follow this. We'll follow the whole steps here. Close out of this, move around the Zoom thing real quick. All right. So here is notable Python data, right? That's Carol's project. I'll go into the next notebook here in a second. Let's pick this one here. Advanced R in Star Wars sounds exciting. So I imagine which data set was this for this?
Actually, R is interesting. R has a lot more built-in data sets within their thing, so it's probably not the best example.
Okay. I just got excited because of the Star Wars thing. So we'll use this one here.
Yeah, That one
right.
uses, I think, the police
Police.
CSV.
Right. So I need the police CSV file. So I'll do this. I'll download this police.csv file. There it is. Downloaded it. I will copy and edit this notebook into that new project I created called Dave's project. Duplicate it in there. There we go. And now I need to add that police file in here. So once this just displays, there we go. Add file, upload from my computer. I could have dragged and dropped it if it was somewhere accessible. 9 megs, going to be uploading as fast as it can here. There we go. And there it is. So yeah, so all those steps were the steps, sorry, that you'll need to take here to run one of Carol's notebooks with the data set that she had using it there.
Awesome. And then if folks have questions as they try and do it themselves, by all means, I think Dave will be able to answer them because I can't actually see them when I do it. Where's my sharing screen? There it is. Thank you, Dave. That was super helpful. Okay. So, once you have a data frame, understanding what the columns are and the different data types are is really useful. Because sometimes when you get a CSV, the data types are not what you would expect. You might want the dates to actually, instead of just being a generic object, to actually be a date format. And so you could change that within it. I'm not going to do that for all of these because it would take a while, but definitely the documentation for Pandas. And there's also an awesome cheat sheet in the Pandas documentation now that gives you the basics. And I highly encourage that. We can, I don't know if you can upload a PDF in Discord, but if we can, that would be a good one to pull out of the Google Drive and drop in there. So the other thing you can do with Pandas is on a data frame, you can describe it, and describing it will give you some basic statistics. It'll give you the count of each element, what the mean, standard deviation, min and max, and as well as the 3 quartiles. And that can be really handy just to get a real quick overview of what is in your data frame. And then really the next step that I typically do is I will then bring up Data Explorer and start looking at the data itself and, looking at things like, a summary histogram is oftentimes, did I just lose this or I didn't execute it maybe? That was the problem. Oops. It's up there.
You're grouping by you must have run this before in a different data set, because if you look at the bottom there, you're grouping by a field that didn't exist.
Ah, good, probably did, because I use this
Yep.
notebook quite often. Here, let me. Which one was I doing? This one?
Yeah. So if you go down to the bottom, you'll see here that it's highlighted in red.
Oh yeah, group by state, and state doesn't exist. So that's probably not.
Yeah, so just as background for everyone else, what happened there is Dex saves all the previous work you did for a cell, so that when you rerun that cell or edit that cell, the outputs will come the same. But it will get confused in this case if you change the data set and that field doesn't exist anymore, because it's thinking it should be trying to render something based on field X, and field X doesn't exist.
Yeah, what's interesting though, it's still picking up the dates from the old data set. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. I take that back. It's just a weird data set. Yeah, So I would have had to convert these to really get so again, this would give you in that particular table, you'd have now a filter that says, okay, I want Oscar number 45 to 91. And this would visualize those. If we do it by award, best actor, best actress. Yeah, so if we did the same thing on a different data set by using the template, what we can then do is pull up one of these other data sets. I oftentimes will use the Penguin one, and I encourage you to go ahead and explore the data sets. And for those of you that are experienced with Pandas, there is a notebook, Advanced Pandas, which is a PyCon one, which takes you through all the different steps of, configuring your data, changing types of data. And so these first two notebooks will give you basic information and allow you to get a data set to a DEX visualization, whereas the Advanced Pandas one will give you a lot more of like, okay, what do the numbers mean? How do I remove missing variables and values? And then how do I start doing some queries on the data itself? And this has been, Kevin Markham's workshop has been one of the most popular ones at PyCon for the last few years. So it's really done well. He's got links out to the videos sections of that. And for those that are wanting a deeper dive into Pandas, this is probably what I would choose first for folks to do. And again, remember, you can use the help command and then put parens outside of these and get information on individual commands as well, or use the Pandas documentation. Let's see if this guy came back up. So really at this point, the rest of the workshop was going to be you playing with whatever data that you wanted to play with. If you wanted to run through the R notebook, we can certainly do that as well. It's kind of cool. It's a little bit different than how you would do it in Python. Again, we're going to import Pandas. And now we should have a data frame that has information about different penguins, different species, the length of their builds, their flippers, the sex. This particular data frame is going to have a different shape than the last one. It's got 344 rows and 7 columns, and to print it out in a nicer way, you have that. Because this has more value data than the last database, info should be a little more important, so you know what units the bill length they're in and things like that. These are floats. If they had been integers, it would say integers next to it instead as a data type. You could probably change the sex to Boolean if you wanted to. In this case, I'm not going to, because there may be things that didn't have a value for the sex. But what's nice is now the numerical ones actually have some different means, and obviously the bill depth is really different than the bill length. The flipper length, very different than the body mass, and you can see that there's a large variation in size of the penguins. And then you should be able to use DEX to then visualize some of this information. At first, it'll load the data frame. It'll show you the table. I have no idea what 0.58% invalid is. It might, oh, it's because one of the, at least one of them has not a number in it. So it's just going to ignore it, but it is going to tell you that it's not available, which can be really handy when you're just doing a first pass on the data. You know, if you don't get the invalids coming up, then you know your data is good to go. And it looks like it's probably, okay, so this one, 3.2% of all of our data doesn't have a sex indicated. It's got a null value. So if we went through the step of cleaning up our data, we would then be getting rid of these, either these rows or making an estimate on what the value should be. So I encourage you to, play around with these. I'm not sure why it's holding those states, but Dave, I'm glad you know why. So this is just showing the different types of penguins, whether they're Adelie, chinstrap, Gentoo penguins. This is the index itself, but if we wanted to make it more useful, we could change it, let's say, to body mass, and that would give us a sense of which penguins are large, which ones are smaller, and if we wanted to group it by what island the penguins come from, we could do that. Looks like there's a lot more penguins that are larger on Biscoe Island. So we would probably say that Biscoe Island probably has a lot more of the Gentoo penguins than the other two penguin types. Quickly, I will run through the R notebook just because I know we have some R folks in here and they might be interested in the R notebook itself. It's a very basic one using the Star Wars data set that's already built into the R package that we're going to use. Select our kernel. And then the first thing we're going to do is install a package.
Actually, Carol, while that's running, this is a good example. Can you talk through the indicators that a user has to know what the status of the execution of that cell is?
Sure.
So, yeah.
So there's a couple things. One is, this is what we affectionately call blobby. And it's really just an image or GIF that lets you know, okay, something's happening, something's working. The tooltip on it is also going to give you an indication of where it is. The other place where you can see is down here, it's going to give you the kernel status. And in this case, the kernel is still connecting. And one cell is ready to run. Now you've changed it to processing and connected, and you can see actually blobby working right now. It's installing the package from where it lives out in the rest of the internet, and it'll give you some indications here now that the package is done. Now, instead of having blobby, you have the time and how long it took to import that package, install that package. Instead of importing like you would in Python to use a library, you're going to actually use the library command. And interesting. It will tell you, for those of you that are using R, you can install the packages from Tidyverse, and it will show you all the different packages that it is installing. And again, like Dave said, you can tell it's working because Blobby is going back and forth. Another indicator that we're going to have is actually on the favicon. It will display what the kernel itself is doing. So now you can see we have ggplot, Tibble, and tidyr, readr. These are all different libraries that are commonly used in the R data stack. And let's just say that we want to use the Star Wars data, which is a data set that's already built in. It's going to say the dimensions of the Star Wars data frame is 87 by 14 columns, 87 rows by 14 columns. If we want to display it, much like we do with the data frame in Pandas, you can have the variable for the data frame, and you'll get the eye color, sex, gender of a number of different Star Wars characters. You can then do filtering. Okay, let's say we want all the Star Wars characters that have light colored skin and eyes that are brown. We could also see if there were blue-eyed characters. I have no idea if there are. There's a few. And then if you wanted to look at additional statistics on that data frame, you can also create a data series and then wind up using that information in ggplot to actually display the data to the user. And I haven't tried it yet, but there are some libraries with R that let you convert things from Python to R. It'd probably be an interesting thing to try, but I haven't actually done that yet. The R kernel for us is fairly new. But
Carol, should we point out here as well that with Dex currently only works within Python notebooks, so you can't use Dex within R currently.
That is true. That is true currently, which is why we're using ggplot, which is the sort of most common plotting library within R. So that's what I have. Questions? I think Dave's been doing a good job of fielding them. You have any last words to wrap up? I'm going to stop sharing for a moment unless folks want me to continue to share.
There's no more current questions in the Discord channel, but we can pause there for a second too, just give time if anyone wants to ask any last questions.
And one thing I would want to encourage people to do, probably the best resources beyond the documentation for the individual libraries in the Python data stack is looking on YouTube at the PyCon videos and PyData videos and SciPy videos about the different data's manipulation techniques, different visualization techniques. All of those are free, open sourced, oftentimes have repos associated with it, and can really give you some of the best resources in a free way. Cool.
So, and just as a reminder, right, so Carol and I will be active as much as we can in the Discord channel, right, rest of today, tomorrow, all next week, up until the event next Saturday. Both of us will be active next Saturday, as well as probably a number of other team members from Notable that will be more than happy to help out as you start actually engaging in the Data Jam itself next Saturday. So please don't hesitate to reach out, either DM us or put a message on the Notable support channel, which is the kind of broader channel for any notable questions that's on that Discord server.
Sure. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. And I know some of you have more advanced experience. So please do, if you have questions about Python libraries or where to find things, definitely use the Discord channel or Notable's forum to ask those questions. And I'd be happy to kind of connect you to the right resources. But we're really pleased that we got to share something that we've been working on for a little over a year. And hopefully you were able to see glimpses of how we're trying to make data more accessible for all, which I think is just a super important thing in our world today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for putting this together. I'm very happy that we got a chance to collaborate with Notable, and we're very excited that folks get a chance to work with the platform during the team projects.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. And thanks to our helpers too.